Save America bros. Yeah, they came from the Obama campaign, started a podcast and just started talking and, shit like that. And they are very much in this DC elite bubble. And ever since Kamala Harris has lost, they've been trying to, I guess, scratch their heads here about what went wrong and how do we beat Trump? And that's pretty much what this conversation here is about. Unfortunately, they decided to interview Stephen A. Smith about this question. How do they beat Donald Trump? What did they do wrong? And I know some people don't like Stephen A. Smith, and I know some people have told me that he's too loud or his voice is too loud or whatever. But I think in this particular instance, he's 100% correct. And I think he's kind of right to be loud. Listen to this, because Stephen A. Smith is really going to check Pod Save America.
And you're right. I mean, his message is burn it all down. And he somehow gets a pass for having been in charge for 4 years when all the problems he's complaining about now still existed. But Democrats were boring. We're the NBA skills competition where Wemby's cheating while Trump is the USA-Canada hockey game where there's 3 fights in 10 seconds and you can't look away. And I don't know how to compete with that. We don't have a leader who can compete with that. We don't have a party that can compete with that. We don't have a message that can compete with that.
But tell why.
Pause. So here's the first problem. The Pod Save America admits publicly that the Democratic Party doesn't know how to compete with Donald Trump. And if you don't know how to compete with him, then you don't know how to beat him. And I said this before in 2020. The reason why Trump lost in 2020 was because of the pandemic. Had it not been for the pandemic, even everything that happened, I think Donald Trump would have won re-election. So here's the thing. You never admit that you don't know how to compete with your opponent. These are the types of things that you say behind closed doors. Like, you don't say this publicly because now you've let your opponent know that you don't know how to compete with them. I don't know. This is one of those things. And you can use this in sports as well. I mean, imagine if Jason Tatum. Imagine if Jason Tatum from the Boston Celtics said publicly, man, I don't know. It's just, we don't know how to compete with Kyrie. You don't say that publicly. You keep that to yourself. You never show your opponent that you're already defeated. And that's exactly what Pod Save Bro did. He says it out loud. We don't know. We don't know how to beat you. We don't know how to compete with you and da-da-da. Shh. These are things that you don't say in public. You never let them know that you don't know how to do it. But Stephen A. Smith breaks this down, and I thought he did a really good job with this. So listen here.
Hockey game where there's 3 fights in 10 seconds and you can't look away. And I don't know how to compete with that. We don't have a leader who can compete with that. We don't have a party that can compete with that. We don't have a message that can compete with that.
But tell why. You can't compete with that, and you don't have that. I'm not talking about you specifically, of course.
I know.
About the Democratic Party. You don't know that, and you can't compete with that for the biggest reason of all. Because y'all are too busy trying to pick candidates for the American people instead of listening to the American people tell you who they want.
Oh, we will drop a beat on that. We will drop a beat. Dance with me. Dance with me. Do the rock face. Dance in your face. So that deserved a beat drop. That is 100% true. Stephen A. Smith here is calling out the Democratic Party for cheating.
The last Democrat that the American people told you they wanted was Barack Obama. Hillary Clinton, it's her turn. Bernie Sanders had momentum. It's Hillary's turn. Joe Biden captured momentum because Representative Clyburn got involved in South Carolina, saved his behind, but it's really his turn. Okay? He has no business running for re-election, But everybody went for it, knowing he was supposed to be transitional. He's going to be 81 years of age. Then you sit up there. He doesn't have a primary. Then he goes on the debate stage, embarrasses himself. Then y'all still let him take 3 damn weeks to walk away instead of getting the hell out there immediately so you can see if there's somebody other than Kamala Harris who could be the Democratic nominee. Then she gets the nomination and everybody wants to act like she's the rock star all of y'all wanted all along. Oh, my God, let's throw up our hands and just to say, hey, she is the one.
But Stephen A. did vote for Kamala Harris. Now, to the point here that he said about they're just picking people, right? So, yeah, a lot of people came out heavily in support of Barack Obama. I'll never forget that in 08. Never forget that. He still has the largest number of Black voter support since I've been an adult. Actually, since I've been alive, damn. But he still has that. Nobody's been able to match that. No other Democrat candidate has been able to match that. And Black voters have been leaving the Democratic Party since 2016 and on. They've continued to leave. So there's that. This point here that he says it was so-and-so's turn. It was so-and-so's turn. When he brings up the Bernie situation, he even points out that Jim Clyburn was the one that told everyone in South Carolina that we're going to support Joe Biden. Okay, great. But the problem is that for those of us who were paying attention during that time, Bernie Sanders was leading. Bernie Sanders had already won Nevada. He'd already won New Hampshire. And it wasn't even until later on that they admitted that he actually did win Iowa. They tried to push Buttigieg over the margin with that. And that was just ridiculous. Again, there's other ways to cheat. The way that it was going, Bernie Sanders was going to get the nomination. And so the Democratic Party, meaning the Democrat leadership like Obama and the Clintons, they decided to work behind the scenes and tell other politicians that were in that race that they needed to drop out to help Biden, not to help Bernie, to help Joe Biden. So yes, they do select people for us. But to that point, Stephen A., you're saying this and you're also calling out how Kamala was selected and she didn't go through a primary process, but you still voted for her. And that's why they continue to do it. Nobody is running away from what the Democratic Party is doing, not in mass. Because as long as they've been able to tell you since 2016, I have heard actually starting 2015, I have heard, but Trump. And all they have to do is say that to some people, and then you will just ignore the cheating. You'll ignore how they took delegates from Bernie Sanders and just gave states to Hillary Clinton that she didn't even win in 2016 because people were like, but Trump. So as long as people continue to do what the Democratic Party wants you to do, which is come out and vote for them anyway, and not push back on them heavily, and by pushing back on them heavily is by walking away from them altogether. En masse. Why would they change? Why would they do anything differently? Why? So there's those things.
You know good and damn well that wasn't the truth. Meanwhile, Trump has been around since 2015. They had Christie, they had Kasich, they had what is it, Fiorini? I believe her name is.
Yep. Carly Fiorina.
You had later on, you had DeSantis, you had Nikki Haley, you had Ramaswamy, you had all of these people. It didn't matter. We went through lawfare and all this stuff. It didn't matter. They looked the public in the face and they said, "We want him. We don't care what y'all want," and forced the Republican Party to capitulate to the demands of their constituency.
Which is exactly how it should be, right? So imagine if, because the establishment wanted Nikki Haley as the nominee, not Donald Trump. Imagine if even after Donald Trump won all those states, imagine if the leadership of the GOP said, "Oh, we're going to give the nomination to Nikki Haley." Don't you think that Republican voters would have been pretty angry? Because a lot of Nikki Haley's votes came from independent voters, not registered Republican voters, by the way. Don't you think Republican voters would have been pissed? Okay. So why weren't Democrat voters pissed enough after that happened to Bernie Sanders in 2016? Here we go.
That's what they did. The Democrats somehow, some way have gotten away with ignoring the constituency and compelling the constituency to capitulate to what they want as a party. And that is the problem. And that's why I said it all needs to go. Some of those candidates need to go. The pundits, the strategists, they need to go. Whoever was involved with the latest election, from a strategy standpoint, every one of them should be fired. Every one of them.
We're cleaning house. I think Joe Biden running for re-election was a catastrophic mistake. We will not recover from it for a long time, and I completely agree with you there. But
Kamala Harris also running and not going through a primary was also a catastrophic mistake. And I know they don't want to say that. And that's another thing. It's not just about Joe Biden. Kamala Harris not going through a primary was a problem. And that needs to, I cannot say that enough. That needs to really, really be said. Listen to this part.
I want your thoughts on this. Donald Trump is using sports in a really smart way politically. I think he went to college football games and UFC fights during the campaign. He went to the Super Bowl. He did a loop around the track of the Daytona 500 in his limo over the weekend. It feels like he's creating a bond with these audiences that Democrats don't have. And how do you think Democrats can be a part of that conversation? I can't think of anyone who would go to a game, like, except for Barack Obama going to NBA games because he genuinely loved the sport. But like, who else?
This is why I'm a candidate. I don't want to be. And that's why I am one. Because you see, I wouldn't go to the Daytona 500, but I'd have been at the Super Bowl. I'd have been at the hockey All-Star game. I'd have been at NBA All-Star weekend. I'd be at the World Series. I'd be at All-Star weekend for baseball. I mean, the list goes. I'd be at a boxing match. I'd be at a UFC match, et cetera, et cetera. The point is, you're a politician. You're supposed to be able to do what the people want you to do as a politician. See, this is just, you're giving me damning evidence I didn't even think about. I didn't think about it until you brought it up. I'm going like this. Wait a minute. Aren't they politicians? Isn't it their job to recognize and notice what their constituency finds appealing and cater to that?
But let me tell you, if Obama went to the Super Bowl, Fox News would be like, how dare he? This cost $10 million. He puts.
Who cares? Who cares? This is another problem that the Democratic Party has. They worry too much about what other people think, you know. And again, we can go back to sports. Because again, those of you who play sports, you know what I'm talking about. Like when you're really trying to win, you are not supposed to be focused on what the other team thinks about you. Now you can focus on their plays. You can watch their tapes. So you can see, like, if we're playing basketball, you can see like how their guard moves, how their forward moves. You can see if they're doing man-to-man coverage. You can watch and see if they're doing zone. You can watch their tapes. But you're not supposed to be sitting up there worried about what they're thinking about you. Who gives a damn? Who gives a damn? Why should Democrats care if Fox News would complain that Barack Obama went to... What do you care? Republicans don't vote for Obama anyway. The Democratic Party is too meek. They have become so, and again, the squad was supposed to push back on all of this. They were supposed to be that fireball going into the Democratic Party to change some things. They didn't get that done. What did happen, though, was that I guess the Republican Party kind of, looked over at what the squad was supposed to do and didn't get done. And we saw the Freedom Caucus in the Republican Party force a vote when the squad would not. So sometimes people learn from watching you what you did not do. And then they tried, to go forward and do it. But the Democratic Party, the Democrat politicians, they're just so concerned about what somebody else thinks about them. I don't want to go do this because I might get that opinion, right? Joe Rogan endorsed Bernie Sanders and Democrats, even AOC was against that Joe Rogan gave the endorsement. Oh my God, what impression does it give? Who gives a fuck? And that's how I know you guys have spending too much time there with Goldman Sachs, too much time with the academics, that you're worried about how people see you and what they think about you instead of what the fuck you're supposed to get done. That's a big problem. Big problem with the Democratic Party. So Stephen A. Smith has some things to say. And the Pod Save America dude, he shows it as well. He shows you. Even he thinks these things. Even he thinks, but then they would have said, da, 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 da. The Democrats are always on the defense. And let me tell you, there's a time and place for everything. Sometimes you do need defense. But hell, you also need offense. And the Democratic Party doesn't play offense. If I know you don't play offense, I know how to beat you. I know how to beat you. If I know that you're scared to play offense, I know how to beat you. And you say it publicly. Just think about these things. Now, Brianna Joy Gray brought up a really good point here. She said, big open lane for anyone who wants to run on hating Democrats, billionaires, and U.S. imperialism. Who would have thunk? And she's posting this poll from when Bernie Sanders won. Now, again, like Bernie has really, really sold out. He's out there like advocating for war right now. In 29 out of 30 polls at that time, Bernie beats Trump. It was very clear. It was very clear. But that's not what Dem leadership wanted. They didn't want that. So that's a perfect example when Stephen A. said, you guys picked a candidate instead of letting the people pick who they wanted. Perfect example. Then we get to this clown. His name is Eric Levitz, right? So he's another one of those Dem establishment flunkies. 2020 was an open primary in which most of the Democratic leadership and donor class spurned Joe Biden, only to see Democratic voters consistently prefer him in national polls and then deliver him a landslide victory in South Carolina, which led other mod candidates to consolidate behind him. So this is how you debunk this statement, right? I just showed you the polls that showed Bernie Sanders beating Donald Trump, 29 out of 30 polls. This is the same election. Now, Eric wants to overlook that and wants to focus on the fact that Joe Biden, in his opinion, was the right person to go with. That being said, though, he brings up South Carolina. And I got to use this. I have to say this is his talking point because people need to like just throw this aside. When we talk about South Carolina is a red state. I lived in South Carolina. So Joe Biden winning the Democrat primary in South Carolina doesn't mean a damn thing because you can't win the state. And I saw corporate media and also like Eric is doing now, try to use this as a talking point. See, look how well he did in South Carolina. This is a sign. We need Joe Biden. Democrats don't win South Carolina. He didn't win New Hampshire. He didn't win Nevada. He didn't win Iowa. But he won in South Carolina. Yeah, after Jim Clyburn told people to vote for him. So stop using that talking point. That is a terrible talking point. South Carolina is a red state. It's just a mess. And then you'll see here, because people are angry. They're mad at Stephen A. Smith. And that one is James Carville, the same Jim Carville that told you that Kamala Harris was going to win. He's really mad at Stephen A. and he has some things to say. He doesn't like his appearance on Pod Save America. Here we go.
When it comes to sports, I find him to be really insightful. When it comes to politics, he don't know his ass from a hole in the ground. He's on that running his goddamn mouth about how he may have to run as a Democrat because there's nothing left of the Democratic Party. There's no talent. Stephen A., are you shitting me? I mean, you say you're friends with Wes Moore and you say you're friends with Josh Shapiro. I'm friends with both of them. I think they're really extraordinary, talented people. I got news for you, dude. There's 6 or 7 other people in the Democratic Party that are just that talented. So before you start running your fucking mouth off about politics, a topic of which you really don't know anything about, you ought to sit back and think about it and call some people and run it by them. When it comes to sports, I find him to be really insightful. When it comes to politics, he don't know his ass from a hole in the ground. He's on that running his goddamn mouth about how he may have to run as a Democrat because there's nothing left of the Democratic Party. There's no talent. Stephen A., are you shitting me? I mean, you say you're friends with Wes Moore and you say you're friends with Josh Shapiro. I'm friends with both of them. I think they're really extraordinary, talented people. I got news for you, dude. There's 6 or 7 other people in the Democratic Party that are just that talented.
If that's true, well, first of all, you heard what he said about Stephen A. Smith. I'm pretty sure that Stephen A. will probably respond to this. But first of all, if that's true, why didn't you guys have a primary? for all these talented people to debate each other? Why don't you have a primary? Also, why do you guys keep naming people that take a lot of money from AIPAC? I told you guys about the black faces in high places. Westmore is another one. Don't be fooled. Why are you naming these people? And I think it's really interesting. And I said this before, like sports is Stephen A. Smith expertise. Politics is not. But he has said some things about the Democratic Party that is actually true. But speaking of expertise, James Carville here, he says that you don't know what you're talking about. It's not your expertise, da-da-da. But is it James Carville's expertise? Because James Carville told us that Kamala Harris was going to win. Didn't he tell you guys this when I told you she wasn't? So is it your expertise anymore? Also, every time you're on, the news, shout out to Case Study QB for this clip. You ain't always got to have on an LSU hat or LSU shirt. I wonder how LSU feels about this. This guy's just cussing up a storm and da-da-da. And then it was a way he could have framed that without saying some of the things that he said. But honestly, at this point, James Carville, you don't know either. You're not no expert either. I don't even consider myself to be a damn expert. But you ain't an expert either. You've been getting it wrong. You come from the Bill Clinton era, which you said was the right way to go. And you said the Bernie Sanders populism was too far left and not the way for the Democratic Party to go. Then after Kamala lost, you said Bernie Sanders was right. So you don't know either. You all over the place. All over the place. Stephen A. Smith is correct. The Democratic Party doesn't have a solid bench. You guys just picking people that, Westmore and da-da-da. And I can prove it to you. I can show you how bad the Democratic Party is doing right now. This is the new poll. Steve Kornacki. Job performance. Donald Trump, 45% approve, 49% disapprove. Congressional GOP, 40% approve, 52% disapprove. Congressional Dems, only 21% approve. 68% disapprove. Now, I don't think any of these numbers are great for either. I don't think these are great numbers for Trump. Better than he had before. I don't think these are great numbers for GOP Congress. I don't think these are great, and definitely not great numbers for congressional Dems. But the Democratic Party right now, congressional Dems, their approval rating is 21%. So I said, we tried to tell you what would happen if the Democratic Party didn't embrace a pro-worker, anti-war agenda. We tried to tell you that Dems were losing black voters, but these totals aren't great for either party in the duopoly. So what have I been telling you guys? What have we been telling them? It's why you have the numbers that you have. And then to make things even crazier, this is wild. Check this out. Justice Dems is trying to raise money again. Here they go again. Justice Democrats, now is the time to primary some spineless, self-serving corporate Democrats. Nominate someone you know who will actually fight for you to replace the representatives that keep failing you. First of all, under Biden administration, it was just over about a year and a half ago, you said you guys didn't have any money. You also announced under Biden's administration you weren't running any candidates under Justice Democrats. So now all of a sudden you got money? Where'd that money come from all of a sudden? People need to start asking that question. 2, does everybody see the game here with Justice Democrats and this whole squad fig? When Donald Trump is in office, that's when they want to fight. Because the fight isn't really against the establishment Democrats, the way that Justice Democrats was explained to us by Kyle Kulinski and Cenk Uygur. The fight really was against Donald Trump. This is something that was explained a long time ago. Justice Democrats was formed as a response to Donald Trump. And the idea was that they would come in and have a hostile takeover of the Democratic Party because the Democratic Party had to be that bad for Donald Trump to actually win. But what you saw come of this was Justice Democrats and squad-like members just basically going into Congress, getting a career, just riding this all out, not fighting back against Democrat establishment. and totally mute for the most part during Biden's presidency. The ones who really spoke out, especially earlier on during the genocide, with the exception of Rashida Tlaib, Cori Bush, Jamal Bowman, gone. Just like that. AOC had to be pushed into doing it. She had to be pushed into calling it a genocide, et cetera, et cetera. So, and then they still wanted to shame people for not supporting Kamala Harris. So now this same fucking project wants people to nominate more people to run through Justice Democrats. They out there asking for more money. When you click on the link, it sends you the money. Asking for more money again to repeat this process because now Trump's in office. None of this was happening under the Biden-Harris administration, and they were committing genocide. So what does that tell you, folks? They only want to fight when Trump's in office because they only really want to fight against Donald Trump. They don't really want to fight against these establishment Democrats. If they wanted to do that, they would have been doing that. That's the sell. That's the sell. And here's something else they need to pay close attention to. This poll that came out, Harry is back. Trump's broken the mold by remaking the electorate. Everybody needs to see this. Stephen A. Smith is correct.
What is going on here? Well, Donald Trump is doing his best Frank Sinatra interpretation or impersonation, going my way. Okay, Trump's net approval rating overall, look at this. He's at plus 3 points. He's been above water. He's been above water his entire second term, excuse me. Look among independents, though. He's way underwater. He's way underwater. He's at minus 10 points. Normally, you win independents. Therefore, you win the middle. But in fact, Trump is doing the exact opposite. He is winning overall, but losing among independents. And this looks an awful bit like what happened in the fall election, where, of course, Kamala Harris won among independents, but Donald Trump won overall. Trump is repeating this playbook, breaking history, doing poorly with independents, but doing considerably better than he did in term number one, overall being above water.
Okay. So that means that Donald Trump is still performing well with his base. So even though he's down with independents, and to Harry's point, like he was going into the election, if you'll notice that he's up 3 points overall. And I'm gonna go ahead and say something. And again, some people don't like to hear this, but the reality is there are a number of people that I know that are happy about Donald Trump just on the immigration issue alone. Not everybody agrees with everything that he's doing, but some people agree with one or two things that he's doing, or the one thing that they were asking him to do. And that's where I think some of that support also comes in. So that's I'm trying to tell you guys, that's a real big one there. So you see what's happening. Down with independents, but he's still up 3 points overall.
So what is the reason for this, that he's posting basically overall, he's up, but you're seeing this, and what's the reason?
This makes no sense, you might think, but what's going on here? Well, first off, what's going on here is, remember in term one, there was all that big opposition of Donald Trump. Democrats hated him. Well, right now, Trump's net approval rating among Democrats is underwater, way underwater at minus 78 points. But the Trump base is consolidated behind the Republican president to an extent that we really did not necessarily see in term number one. Look at this. His net approval rating is plus 84 points. So more Republicans are behind Donald Trump than Democrats are opposed to Donald Trump. And that is lifting him up and giving him that positive net approval rating, despite the fact that he's losing among Democrats and losing among independents, Sarah.
So do you guys see this? Plus 84 points with the GOP. Again, Biden didn't have those numbers, obviously, so again, the Democratic Party has a lot of work to do if they actually want to win. But then there's something that Tariq Nasheed pointed out, and I just want to show you guys this. I thought this was very interesting here. Today, there were nationwide protests against Trump, and notice what you don't see. You don't see any Black people protesting against Trump. Why do you think this is? Look at this.
You can see Washington, large crowds just across from the U.S. Capitol. New York City, protesters downtown in Union Square. Again, a sign that people are expressing themselves with their time, precious time off if they have the holiday, free time they might have gotten, a lunch break, depends on the person. But this is one of the ways that you see civic engagement. Places like Michigan, a smaller town of St. Joseph, where we saw People gathering, again, smaller crowds for a smaller area, but gathering even amidst the cold, showing their signs to passersby, drivers, etc. Miami, San Francisco, we're also seeing this across the country today. Albany, Portland, one protester in Boston with a sign.
There's Boston right there. They're eating the checks. They're eating the balances. That's actually pretty clever. I ain't gonna lie. He has a Boston College hat, so he probably goes to BC. But this is a good point. Notice you don't see black people out there protesting against Donald Trump. So what does that tell you? Hell, there were black people protesting against Israel. There were black people out there, all the different protests that I've covered. There were black people out there protesting, for Gaza. There were black people protesting to end the wars. When I went to the rally, the anti-war rally in DC, there were black people out there protesting against the wars and stuff. I don't see any black people out there protesting against Donald Trump. So what does that tell you? If you listen to MSNBC, CNN, they would have you believe that. I mean, if you're listening to Simone Sanders, if you're listening to Roland Martin, they would have you believe that all black people are outraged. They out there in the streets. No, we're not. And yeah, some people may be upset, but are we upset enough to go out there and protest against it? Stephen A. Smith is right. But you can't tell this to the Dem fam, guys, the Dem fam. You can't tell them to them. So when we talk about winners and losers with this particular story, who's the winner and who's the loser? I mean, because right now, I would say that Stephen A. Smith is the winner. I would say that he's correct. And I think James Carville and Pod Save America, you guys are the ones that are the losers on this one. It's really interesting to me that many of us were saying this for years. Many of us have been saying since 2016 that you got to do something for the people. You can't continue to ignore black voters. You got to do something for the black community. You got to do something for, just like you do things for other parts of the community, other communities, you got to do things for the black community. We've been saying this for years, but it took them hearing it from sports commentator Stephen A. Smith for it to really click. They had to hear it from a celebrity. Things to think about, folks. Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.